Sounds good.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to the Let's Paint Live Monday evening class here in the Michaels Community Classroom. We are thrilled to have you as always. And Jessie is back this week to teach. It's been actually a few weeks, I think, since Jessie's been here. And so for those of you who are regulars, you of course know Jessie. So that's exciting. We are teaching, or when I say we, that is the, that's the Jessie we, because I'm not really doing anything. Jessie will be teaching you Summer Citrus this evening, which is actually a really cool painting. It's on glass, so it's a little bit different. So I'm really excited to see how this goes myself. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Jessie.
Thanks, John. So like John said, my name is Jessie Jennings. I'm a content creator here at Plaid. And if it's your first paint night with Michaels, welcome. We're so happy that you came. And if you're a regular, welcome back. I'm so happy to see all of you guys. I'm so glad you came to paint Summer Citrus with us. So like John said, tonight it's a little bit different because we're painting on glass. So we've done this a couple times in the Michaels Community Classroom. It's not completely new, but typically we paint on a canvas. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell you guys the kind of surface I have here and then tell you the rest of my supplies. So I have this like double frame here. So this one's a little bit different. This one opens up, but what's important for your frame is that you have two panels of glass. So in the supply list, I put a floating frame. So just one of those typical floating frames from Michaels. You have two panes of glass. If you do not have a floating frame, or if you do not have glass, you can totally do this on a canvas. Yours will just be layered. So we're gonna kind of work from back to front. So don't worry about that. Yours is just going to be layered up. So instead of like going on each side of your panes of glass, you're just going to start on your canvas and dry and keep layering on top of that same piece. Okay. So if you only have, I see people saying you only have one piece of glass, don't worry. You're going to be able to figure out as we go how to kind of do this. So for example, I'll give you a little bit of an example just so you can kind of wrap your head around it. On the back of my second pane of glass, I have it all painted blue. And that's how we're seeing that pretty blue color coming through. So what you'll do is just paint that on the back of your glass and then paint this right on top of it. And then paint this on top of that. So hopefully that makes sense. You're just going to layer it instead of having layers of glass. You're just going to layer your layers of paint on the same piece of glass or on your canvas, depending on what it is that you're using. So if you have two panes of glass, like I do, like we put in the event listing with the supplies, I'm going to make sure you guys know exactly which side of which pane of glass we're on. I'm going to have my first pane of glass and my second pane of glass. And I'm going to tell you whether we're on the front or the back. So don't worry, I'm going to make it super clear. If you did, we've done this before. I know Kirsten has done a couple glass paintings for Michaels as well. If you've painted with Kirsten, I'm going to make it really clear. So don't stress out. You'll be able to follow along really easily. Okay, so that being said, that's what we'll be painting on tonight. And I've already taken my glass out of this one. So I just have my two panes of glass here. So if you have yours still in the frame, go ahead and carefully slide them out. Make sure to be really careful because the edges can be sharp. I also have some brushes here tonight. So I believe I put that Craft Smart variety pack of brushes. Just, whatever brushes you have at home will work for this painting. You can absolutely make do. The ones I'll be using specifically are a 3/4 inch flat brush. So any brush that looks like this will work perfectly fine. You have a 1 inch flat or a 1/2 inch flat. If it looks something like this, it will be great for this painting. I have my number 10 round brush. So this is just a larger round brush. Again, anything that looks like this, it will be absolutely fine for this painting. Don't stress if you don't have these exact brushes, just grab one that looks like it. I've got my number 12 flat brush, which is basically just a 1/2 inch flat brush. So again, a smaller flat, anything like this is great. And then I've got my number 5 round brush. So kind of like a liner brush, just a smaller round brush. I basically have a larger version or a smaller version of my round and a larger version and a smaller version of my flat. So just make sure you have something kind of like these. If you don't have the exact ones, it's perfectly fine. All right. So then I've got I just have some like palette paper here lining my table just because I'm going to be like flipping the glass around just in case I get messy, because sometimes I get messy. So just, some newspaper or whatever you use at home to, cover up your table. I've got some wax coated palette paper here for putting my paint on. I've got my water basin and my paper towels for cleaning my brush. And then I also have my hair dryer. So don't forget, keep a fan near you or a hair dryer. If you've joined one of these classes before, you know that we try our best to keep it within the hour allotted for us. So we go sometimes a little bit quickly, but we definitely use our hair dryer between steps so we can continue painting. We don't have to wait for dry time. So make sure to grab a hair dryer if you have one. And while I'm saying that, I just want to remind everybody that this class is being recorded, like you probably saw on your screen. So it'll be posted within the next 24 to 48 hours on michaels.com and on their YouTube page. So if you don't have a hairdryer, if you're worried about keeping up, please feel free to watch along, get inspired, ask questions, see what we're doing, and then you can go back and watch it on YouTube later at your own pace and pause it as you need to and fast forward or rewind to rehear things. I really encourage that you do that. And then, of course, last but not least, our paints. So since we're using glass, we are not going to use our regular acrylic paints. We are going to use our FolkArt multi-surface paints. So multi-surface paints, if you haven't used them, are really excellent because you can use them on, canvas for sure, glass, terracotta, metal, even fabric. So these work on tons of different surfaces and they just stick really well and they've got really great coverage. So it will just stay on your glass way better than just plain acrylic paints would. But that said, if you don't have if you only have acrylic paints, since this is just for decorative purposes, it's not going to scratch off. If you're just going to hang this on your wall or set it on, on your dresser or wherever you're planning on displaying it, chances are it's not going to get bumped and, knocked around, so it won't scratch off. So if you only have the acrylics tonight, don't stress. They'll still work really well for this painting. All right, I feel like I just said so much stuff, but I think that is it, and I think we are ready to get started. Okay, any questions yet, John?
I don't think so. I mean, the main thing was if folks don't have the glass situation or whatever, but I think you've covered all that. So
yeah,
we will go over the colors as she uses them. She'll remind everyone of what those are.
Yeah.
So I think we're good to go.
Okay, cool. All right. So like I said, I'm going to work from back to front. So if you are just using a standard canvas or paper or whatever it is that you might have at home that you're painting on, just do the exact same layers as me, but you're just going to keep building on the exact same thing instead of switching sides of glass. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I have my 2 panes of glass here. I'm going to set one aside. Just going to set it right here so I can grab onto it in a minute. So it's important to note if you're using glass or any sort of, non-porous surface, you always want to clean it first. So I like to use isopropyl alcohol and I spritz it and then I just wipe it down. Or you can just use warm soap and water. So the reason you want to do that is that you want to remove any oils from the surface or any sort of dust or anything like that, because it just helps the paint stick better. If you've got fingerprints or oils on the surface, that can make the paint repel from the glass. So that's why I just like to clean it first whenever I'm painting on glass. It just helps my paint to stick on better. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint this beautiful back color. So you can see here on the back of my layers of glass, I've got this pretty purpley periwinkle blue color. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to mix that and we're going to paint this piece of glass with it. So I'm going to grab some of my Wisteria. This is a really pretty soft purple color. I'm going to put a little bit of that onto my palette. And then I'm also going to grab some of my ink spot, which is this nice dark inky blue color, just like the title. I'm going to put a little bit of that onto my palette. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start mixing those. I always start with 1-to-1 when I'm mixing. I'm going to grab my 3/4 inch flat brush, so the larger of my 2 flat brushes, and I'm going to start mixing those together. And the ink spot, as you can see already, goes a long way. It's starting to make my purple really blue, which is okay. I like that bluish color. I only needed a little bit of ink spot. Okay, so I like this light blue color you guys can see here, sort of medium to light blue color. So again, it was mostly Wisteria with a touch of my ink spot. And I'm going to use my brush and I'm going to paint this all over this entire pane of glass. So I'm going to go as close to the edges as I can. Chances are most of these, the tips of your edges, are going to be covered up by your frame. So if you don't get right up to the edges, you should be okay. But you can see how really nicely this paint goes on. This is why I chose to use multi-surface paint, and this is why I put that in the supply listing for the class, because you can see just the level of coverage you get with these paints on a really non-porous surface, which is tough to do a lot of the time. It's hard to paint on really slick surfaces like this and not and get complete coverage. So I'm just using a regular, acrylic painting brush. You can see I don't have it fully mixed, but that's okay. I kind of like the way that looks. It looks really pretty with the 2 sort of colors showing through a little bit. So nothing fancy. I'm just doing nice big strokes to cover up this pane of glass. I'm gonna cover up the whole thing. Okay. So I've got my whole pane of glass covered, and this is my second pane of glass that I'm working on right now. So I'm going to wipe off any excess paint, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse off my brush, and I'm going to dry this really quick with my hair dryer because we're going to flip it around in a second, paint on the other side. So go ahead and finish up painting this. If you are just painting on a canvas or just one pane of glass, you're going to do the exact same thing as me. You're just not going to flip it over next because you're painting on a canvas. So you're going to want to go ahead and finish painting your canvas and then dry it with the hair dryer, and then you'll just do the next step right on top of this. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dry it now. And again, if you guys are using glass, be sure to be careful. If you lift up your pane of glass, the edges can be really sharp. So just make sure to be careful for me. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and check. And it's a little bit wet in some places. And since I'm gonna flip it over and this is gonna be touching my surface, I'm gonna go ahead and keep drying it and make sure it's super duper dry. So that feels pretty dry to me. So like I said, if you've got the two panes of glass like me, now I'm going to flip it over and we're going to paint on this side. Ooh, look at that. That's kind of pretty. I got some leftover blue under my painting, but I kind of like that. Okay, so if not, if you're painting on a canvas, you're just going to leave it there and hopefully you've got it nice and dry now and you're going to continue painting on top of it. So that being said, I'm going to open this up and show you the layer that we are going to paint next. So inside my little panel here, I have this nice one so I can kind of demonstrate to you the separate layers. So inside of mine here, this is what we're going to go ahead and we're going to start painting. We're going to start painting the base of our lemons. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 12 flat brush or a half-inch flat, whatever you got, anything similar. And I'm going to grab some of my Bumblebee, which is this really pretty bright yellow color. And I'm also going to grab a little bit of my Wicker white. So any white you have is fine. Titanium white, Wicker white, just a little bit of white. And I just want to lighten this Bumblebee a little bit because we're going to have a few different shades of yellow. And we only have 2 shades here in our color palette out of the bottle. So we're going to mix a few in between just so we have lots of different shades of yellow to make our lemons look a little bit more real. So I got my number 12 flat brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white and I'm going to start mixing it into my Bumblebee color. We're looking for this nice soft yellow color, that nice pale pastel-y color. Using my brush to mix my paint. Some people don't like mixing paint with a brush. It's kind of up to you. I kind of do it. These FolkArt brushes are really great and they're really durable and they're really inexpensive. So that's why I like mixing with them. But it doesn't hurt the brushes to do that. Michael's has a great selection of acrylic paint brushes. Okay, so I have that nice pale yellow color. So whenever I do mix paint with my brush, I like to rinse it off. I don't want to go ahead and put this straight onto what I'm painting because you can see here, it's super moppy with paint. That's way too much paint on your brush. You want to wipe off the excess and rinse it and start fresh. You want to have good control over how much paint is actually on your brush. Okay, so make sure your brush is nice and dry. You also don't want to have a ton of water on it whenever you're painting because that'll just drip off onto your painting. So I'm just blotting my brush and paper towel, making sure it's nice and dry. Okay, so now I'm going to pick up some of this nice pale yellow we've made, and I'm going to paint a circle right here. So I'll show you a little bit of a trick to painting circles. I know a lot of people get very scared about painting circles. I totally understand. They can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to start at the top here. I'm going to hold my brush this way. So if everybody looks really quick, I'm going to hold my brush vertically. So of course, usually you hold it this way horizontally. I'm holding it vertically. And I'm going to mark where the top of my circle is going to be. So just marked it down right there. That's where I'm going to start it. and I'm going to pull down to the left, and I'm going to pull down to the right, and I'm going to try to mimic the exact motion. So even if your lemon is a little bit wonky, it'll at least be symmetrical, and that will really help. So hopefully it'll be nice and round, but if not, don't stress. So I'm going to pull down on the left. And do the same thing on the right. I'm going to pull down on the right. So we have a nice circle shape. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fill that in. And if you missed it, we're about to do it for our second lemon, so don't stress. You can see it for the next one. And I'm going to try to get them, you can see it, you kind of, when you're painting with multi-surface paints on a non-porous surface, such as glass or ceramic or anything that, non-porous means anything that doesn't absorb the paint. So like fabric or wood or canvas is a porous surface. It sort of absorbs the paint a little bit and it takes it really well and really smoothly. Non-porous surfaces like glass or ceramic or anything that's shiny, really, the paint's just sitting on top. So sometimes it's hard to get great coverage because the paint's just kind of pushing around, nothing's soaking in anywhere, you're just pushing the paint back and forth. So you can see here, I've kind of got my brush parallel to my surface, and I'm just really gently spreading that so I can avoid any brush strokes and make sure I have a really nice smooth coverage. So I've got my first lemon shape. I'm gonna do the same thing just to the bottom right of it. I'm gonna mark where I want the top to be, I think right there. And I'm gonna pull down to the left. And then I'm gonna pull down to the right. Have a nice circle shape there too. You can go back over it if you feel like you need to. And they don't have to be the exact same. No two lemons are the exact same. So one can be a little bit bigger, one can be a little bit smaller. Totally up to you. No two lemons are the same and no two paintings are going to be the same. Again, I'm just sort of holding my brush almost parallel to my surface and I'm smoothing out that paint to avoid any brush strokes. But guys, if you are seeing a little bit of brush strokes still, if you are seeing a little bit, of your surface behind coming through, don't stress, because please keep in mind all of the layers you're going to be painting on. You can see that's why I'm not worried about that extra blue I got back there, because we're going to be painting so many things on top of this. You won't notice that at all. It's going to get all covered up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse my brush. Make sure I get all the water out. I'm just going to blot it on my paper towel. So now I'm going to grab some of my, any questions, John, real quick before we move on?
No, not at all. I guess everybody must be absorbed in their lemons because there's not a lot of chat and not a lot of questions. We're doing great.
Good. I love that. That hopefully means everybody's having fun.
Yes.
So we've got our background, we've got our two basic lemon shapes. Now I'm going to grab moon yellow, which I just realized I didn't name the colors in the beginning, so I'll be sure to be really clear as I go. But of course, I'm using the exact same that was on the event listing, all of the supplies. So moon yellow is kind of a warmer yellow. It's this yellow that's here. So Bumblebee is like a really bright sunshine yellow. And then this one's like a little bit more orangey. If you don't have moon yellow and you have red at home, take your brighter yellow and just put a touch of red in it and you'll get a much warmer, deeper yellow like this one here. It's kind of like a school bus color almost. So I'm gonna put some of this on my palette. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna keep using my number 12 flat brush. It's nice and dry now, I cleaned it. So we're gonna paint our little lemons that are poking in here, our uncut lemons that are poking into our composition. So I'm gonna pick up some moon yellow on my brush. So when you think about it, when you think about what a lemon looks like, it's very round and then it puckers on either side into those 2 points. So just like we painted these ones here, we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start on my top right by painting a circle. Oops. I'm gonna start by painting a circle. Make it a little bit bigger. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna paint that little pucker. You see how I just did that? I just made that little bump that's on the end of a lemon. And I'm gonna fill it in. And we might need to do 2 coats on this one because this yellow is looking kind of opaque against the, or I'm sorry, kind of transparent against the blue. We want it to be opaque. So I'm gonna do 1 coat and we might dry and go back and do a 2nd coat just so we have a brighter yellow. But that is the basic shape. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing down here in the corner. I'm gonna paint a circle. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna paint that pucker where there's that bump on the end of our lemon. that classic lemon shape. I'm gonna fill it in, and like I said, I think we're gonna go back and do a second coat on that one. Go ahead and clean off my brush. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and dry mine now. So go ahead and finish up your lemon shapes. We're still adding some more details to this layer, and then go ahead and dry it off so we can add a second coat to these moon yellow areas. I'm gonna go ahead and dry it really quick. Just gonna move this. Let's see. It's still a little bit wet. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna hit it just one more time, just another minute. Okay, so that's nice and dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and, oops, with the same brush, my number 12 flat, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna add another coat of that moon yellow, just carefully, because if your paint is still a little bit wet underneath, you're gonna start peeling that up again because we're working on a non-porous surface. So you just wanna really lightly spread that paint over the areas that you dried. You just wanna make sure it's not wet. It's very hard to paint wet on wet when you're painting on glass because it just wants to pick up that first layer back onto the brush. And that, of course, is not what we want. I'm just gently painting this. And you can see how much more opaque it is now, which is what we're going for. Spreading another layer on here. And you kind of end up using a little bit more paint when you're painting on glass than you would on a canvas. Again, we talked about, porous versus non-porous. And since this is a non-porous surface, it's not absorbing anything, you kind of end up putting a lot of paint on top. You're kind of doing a little bit of a smearing sort of thing here because you just want to really cover up that glass, and that's okay. That's just kind of part of it. Go ahead, I'm gonna get that excess paint off my brush and rinse my small flat brush really quick.
So just to recap for a couple of folks who maybe are joining, if you only have one piece of glass, then that's fine. She'll tell you what to do. So you've painted your blue on one side and then flipped it over and you're painting your yellow on the other, and then your top layer can go right on top. You don't have to have that second piece of glass.
Yep, if you've got one piece of glass, you can paint the back with blue, just like John said. And then you're so far you're doing the exact same thing I'm doing here. And then when we go and paint that second piece of glass on top and we have that nice dimension, that's why we're doing these several pieces of glass. Yours will be the same thing. It'll be very pretty as well. You're just going to paint this right on top of there. You just won't have the second piece of glass. So You can do painting tons of ways. No one's giving us the slow down chat, which is what we usually get. So I think everyone is probably doing okay. How's everybody making out with your lemons so far? I don't usually get too many slowdowns.
There we go. We got one slowdown. Can always count on that. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I just want to remind you guys this is being recorded. So we try to stick within the 1 hour time slot that Michael's is so generously gives us. But this is being recorded. So if you feel like it's going a little bit faster than your natural pace, please feel free to just kind of pause your painting and watch and ask questions, make sure you really understand what we're doing here, and then go back in a couple of days to the recording and watch along then.
Yes, I think everyone seems to be doing pretty well. So we're
okay, cool. So I'm gonna move on to the next step. So I'm gonna grab my number 5 round brush, which is this little liner brush, just a small round brush. And I'm gonna pick up some of my moon yellow. If you need more on your palette, go ahead. That's like the warmer of the two yellows, like the school busy yellow that we just used. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna outline these pale round shapes we made that are gonna be our lemons. I'm just gonna go right around the edge of it, and we're gonna kind of paint like the rind or like the skin of the lemon. Just like if we sliced it, you would see that skin around the edge still of the slice. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna paint that. And nothing fancy here. I'm just following that edge. You don't need to worry about, making anything super perfect because we already have that nice circle shape laid out. We're just following the edge of that. It's okay. This one's a little bit transparent. That doesn't bother me. Do the same thing for the top one here. And if your lemons are overlapping a little bit, that's okay too. I kind of like that. Okay, so we have the nice moon yellow outlines now. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna rinse my brush off. Just again, nothing fancy, just a quick outline. And then don't forget, you guys, if you feel like it's a little bit transparent still, do not forget, we're gonna go back with even more layers on top of it. So this is all gonna get covered up. It's layers and layers and layers, and that's how we're gonna make this painting. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to some leaves. So to paint our leaves, I'm gonna mix our two greens together. So kind of like we do with our lemons where we have the two yellow colors and we're gonna mix them and get a few different variations. We're doing the same thing with our leaves. So I've got citrus green here, which is kind of a pretty like lime green color. I'll show you, I'll put it on my palette and show you guys. And then I also have some classic green, which is just kind of like the title, classic green, a nice, grass green color. And I'm going to mix one part of each of those to get something in the middle of those two. So here, I'm going to pull my palette in so you guys can see better. Here we go. So I'm going to scoop up a little bit of my classic green and a little bit of my citrus green. And I'm going to mix those two together to get something in the middle. You can use any brush to mix with. I just kind of grabbed my number 12 just by habit, but any brush is fine. Okay, so now we have this nice middle ground here. And the reason that we wanted to get a middle one is that when we go back and paint all of the details on top, we're going to use our citrus green right out of the bottle and our classic green right out of the bottle. And now they're all going to look different. You'll be able to distinguish between those layers because they're going to be different shades of green. So I'm going to wipe off the excess paint and I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush off because I'm actually not going to use that brush for painting. I just kind of was using it for mixing. Make sure I've got all the water off. And now we're going to grab our number 10 round brush. So this is the larger of the two round brushes that you have, hopefully. I'm going to pick up some of this nice medium green that we mixed. And now I'm just going to paint some leaves. So nothing fancy here. If you decided to do a different composition than me, and by composition, I mean layout of your painting. If you put your shapes in different places than I did, you might want to put your leaves in different places too. If you feel like you have, a big area of negative space, and by negative space, I mean the background. If you have a big area of background that you want to cover up, you might put your leaves somewhere different than me. I'm going to do my best to follow my original composition that was in the class listing, but you can really be creative with it. So I'm going to put some leaves up here. It's kind of like a football shape, just a very classic leaf shape. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to put one here. I'll do one on the left and then a stroke on the right. Very, very simple. And then I'll fill it in. Then I'm going to do a smaller one next to him. So a stroke on the left and a stroke on the right, and then fill it in. I'm going to do some down here too. Again, if you have a different layout than I do, you probably want to put your leaves somewhere different. You want to just fill in some of those big empty spaces so you have a nice full composition. It's nice and balanced. Then I'm going to do some over here as well. One right here. And then a smaller one next to that. And you can do as many or as few leaves as you'd like. Totally up to you. I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my brush off. I'll give you guys just a minute to catch up. Just make sure everybody's in the same place before we move on to our next step.
I have a lemon tree, Jesse, that I've been growing for 3 years in a pot. You know how many lemons I produced last year?
I'm
One.
scared to ask.
One lemon.
One, well, that's pretty good. I've heard that lemon trees take a really long time, don't they, to produce any fruit?
I guess, because I had it for like 2 years and I produced none. And then last year I produced one, and it was the size of a pea, and it grew to like huge, but it was only one. It's a lot of pressure when you only grow one lemon, because then you're like, what do I do with my one lemon? Like nothing seems good enough for your one lemon.
That's true. Did it taste better than store-bought lemons at least?
Well, we made lemonade with it. That's exactly right. Gina suggested make lemonade. That's what I did. It was good.
It
was
tasted
good.
better. Tasted
I'm
better
hoping for more. I'm hoping for more lemons this year.
Okay, well, good. Good luck in your
I
lemon.
also have a lime tree, and I'm yet to produce a single lime. So we'll see.
Well, maybe we'll do a lime painting this summer. It'll give you some luck.
That's what we need. Jimena can fill us in on the difference between lemons and limes in Spanish, which is very confusing to everyone.
Yes, exactly. Okay, guys. All right, so I finished my leaves. Now the last step for this layer of our painting. So for mine, it's the front of my second panel. For you at home, if you're using a canvas, it's just the second layer. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna grab some of my Wisteria, and I've got some of my palette already. So this nice, pretty pale purple. If you need more of that, go ahead and put some down, but I've already got some, so I'm not gonna get any more. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab my number 5 round brush, which is the smaller of our 2 round brushes. And I'm gonna pick up some of my Wisteria, and we're gonna paint a very loose background. So you can see all these little brush strokes, these little marks that I have here, like little tick marks all over the background. We're gonna do that. So I'll start on the left, and I'm gonna smush my brush down. So that's the great thing about these liner brushes or round brushes, is that you can get so many different widths of lines. And what I mean by that is if you press very lightly, you see here, you can get a very fine line. And that's hard to see. I'll hold something up. Here, I'll hold my paper up. So if you press very lightly, you get a very fine line. And if you press down harder, you get a thicker line. So that's a great thing about using a round brush, is that you can really manipulate it and get as many different thicknesses as you want. So we're gonna press down and get sort of that nice big chunky brush strokes, kind of as thick as we can get with this brush. So I'm gonna start on the left, and I'm gonna smush my brush down, and I'm just kind of gonna smush it all the way across my background to fill in those empty spaces, those negative spaces that we talked about earlier. And there's no rhyme or reason. You can make it random, or you can kind of stack them in a pattern. Totally up to you. We just want to fill in some of that negative space with a really cute pop of colored pattern. So I'm just gonna go all around my lemons here. And I just love the way these purples and blues look against the yellow color. I think they look so nice together. I'm just smushing my brush down. You can see I'm not being very careful. I'm being really quick with it. I want it to be nice and loose. And I'm holding my brush horizontally, as you can see. You could hold it up and down if you wanted to. You could smush it down vertically. That'd be cool too. They would just be a little bit longer, but going up and down.
So Shauna is sharing lemon facts with us while we're painting
great.
this evening. Yes, the average lemon has 8 seeds, she said, and 3 tablespoons of juice. And lemons are among the world's most popular citrus fruit. So,
wow.
You know, it's good to know. So Jessie, what color is it again that you were using for these dots?
We're using Wisteria, which is a nice pale purple color. So if you don't have Wisteria at home, if you've got some purple, you can just mix it with white. If you do not have purple at home, you can mix some red and blue and then mix that with white, and you'll have a nice pale purple color. Okay, so now guys, while you're finishing that up, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dry my painting. So you just, take a second, finish up your background, and then do the same. You're gonna go ahead and dry it as well. mine are pretty dry. So I'm gonna give you guys just a second to make sure you're finished with your background and you've got it all nice and dry. Whether you're using one, panel of glass or 2 pieces of glass or canvas, you want to make sure your painting is dry at this point.
And Jesse, when you made your original blue background, what color was that? You used
That was mostly Wisteria, the same color we just used for those dots. And I put a little bit of ink spot in it, which is this nice, bright inky blue color. Well, it's kind of like a dark inky blue color, but it's very pigmented. So you just need a little bit of that. You can see here where we mix it. This is our Wisteria, and then just a touch of that ink spot, and we got that really pretty bright blue.
Right. And then on the hair dryer, I think you put it on high, but you toggle between the cool and the warm. Is that right? Is that the way you do yours, or do you just keep it on one setting?
Yes, I just like John said, I put it on the highest air setting, and then I start on hot. And when I feel like I don't, sometimes if you get acrylic paint too hot while it's still wet, it can start to peel or can start to crack, and we don't want that. So I put it on hot, and then I wait till my painting starts to feel pretty warm, and I switch to the cool setting. I have this little cool blaster button here. I switch to the cool setting, and I kind of go back and forth until my painting is dry. All right, guys, so let's move on to the second step. So hopefully everybody's just dry now. So I'm going to take my second piece of glass very carefully. And if you don't have a second piece of glass, you're just skip this. If you're using a canvas, just skip the step. But if you do have your second piece, go ahead and make sure it's lined up on top now. So I'm going to go ahead and lay my glass right on top. And I want to make sure it's lined up perfectly, because then when we go to put it in our frame later, we don't want it to be askew. We want it to make sure it's lined up so we don't have our two panels kind of like this with the painting. I want to make sure they're nice, exactly where we want the brush strokes to be in the end. So make sure it's nice and lined up all around the edges. And mine looks pretty good. So with that said, I'm going to flip again, guys. Don't forget, if you got the 2 pieces of glass, I'm going to say it one more time, put your second piece of glass down now on top of your painting. If not, just ignore all of this. Just make sure your painting is dry. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into close my original painting here. And we're going to start painting these really cute details on top. That's really going to pull our lemon painting together. So to start that off, I'm going to grab my number 12 flat brush, so the smaller of our 2 flat brushes. And I've got some Bumblebee on my palette already. So just as a reminder, the Bumblebee was like that bright sunny yellow color we were using. I'm going to pick up some of that. And we're going to paint these little lemon wedges. So you can see here, they're just little triangles, really soft, rounded edge to our triangles. And between that is that negative space where you can see, that's where you can start to see the dimension. When we finally have it in our frame at the end, because they're kind of separated here. And, if you have a floating frame, it'll be the same. You can start to see the different layers of painting. And that's why I love painting on these floating frames. I think it's so fun. You can get such great, layered looks to your paintings. But this is where that really starts to come into play. So again, I've got my number 12 flat brush. I picked up some Bumblebee, which is this bright yellow color. And I'm going to start painting, just using the edge of my brush. We can see here, I'm going to start painting these lemon wedges. And they're kind of like the shape of a guitar pick, if you guys are familiar with that. They're like a rounded triangle shape. But I'm going to make sure that, it doesn't have to be perfectly even, because no lemon is perfectly even. But I'm going to try my best to make them kind of evenly spaced. And I'm going right up till the edge. I'm not going over the edge, because I want to see those details in the back. But I'm just using the tip of my brush to fill in these little lemon wedge shapes. And we start to get that really cool layered effect. So I'm just kind of using, the chiseled edge of my brush to draw these really rounded lemon shapes. You could even kind of sketch them all out if you want to do like how I'm doing now. Kind of sketch them all out and see where they're going to be placed, and make sure you've got, room. Like that, and then go back and carefully fill them in. We're just laying out these nice separated rounded triangles. Got a little bit overlap in there, so I'm gonna wipe that off with my finger. And some of you may feel more comfortable maybe using this number 5 round brush, the smaller round brushes, and kind of like drawing it out first and then filling it in with your flat brush, feel free to do that too if that feels more comfortable for you. Do the same thing up here. And again, I'm going right up until the edge. I'm not going over the edge.
So Jesse, just because I think some people are having maybe a little trouble with the contrast between this layer and then the under layer of the lemon, right? So it's all looking very
It's looking the same to you guys.
the same. So what did you use to darken up this layer? Or
so if you guys remember, we did not darken this layer. This layer is pure Bumblebee, and that's because the layer beneath it we added white to. So if maybe you forgot to add your white to that layer, or if it's just still not looking that different, go ahead and add some of your moon yellow to this one here, and that'll make it a little bit darker to make sure you're seeing that contrast. So I don't want to lift it because I'm afraid I'll mess up my placement, but this layer beneath it was, like I said, it was our Bumblebee with white. So we got this nice pale yellow color, if you'll remember. And now this layer on top is just pure Bumblebee. So it should be popping off. It should be a little bit brighter. But if not, if you forgot, don't stress. Just go ahead and put a little dollop of the moon yellow with your Bumblebee, and that'll just darken it a little bit so you make sure to see that contrast.
There you go.
Okay. So I got my wedges in. As you can see, they're not perfect. This one has 6 and this one has 5. Like I said in the beginning, no 2 lemons are the same. So don't stress out if your lemon isn't perfect, because nothing's really perfect in nature. Everything is organic. So now we're gonna let those kind of dry, and we're gonna move on to some of the other details that we're painting, and then we'll come back and add more details to those lemon wedges at the end. So that said, we are gonna go ahead and we're gonna add some details to these 2 lemons that are not sliced that we added in the beginning. So I'm gonna pick up my number 10 round brush, and I'm going to pick up some of my Bumblebee, so just pure Bumblebee. Again, the larger of my 2 round brushes and some Bumblebee. And I've talked about this a lot in our Michael's Mini Classroom paint nights. We, very lightly touch on light source. So you have to kind of decide when you're painting where the light source is. So maybe these lemons are outside, and in which case the light source would be the sun. Or maybe they're, inside John's kitchen growing in a pot, in which case the light source would be whatever kind of light John has in his kitchen. But you need to decide when you're painting where your light source is. So for this painting, we're just kind of going to assume that the light source is coming straight from the top. And so everything on the top of all the shapes will have a lighter highlight, and then everything on the bottom of all our shapes will have a darker shadow. So again, a very loose lesson on light source for your paintings, but adding little strokes like that. Again, if you've painted with me before, you've done this, many times. It just adds a little bit of life to your painting and makes it a little bit more realistic. So that being said, I'm going to use this Bumblebee color as the lighter version of these 2 here, which if you'll remember was moon yellow. And I'm just going to take my brush, my larger round brush, and I'm just going to follow the edge, the top edge of my lemon shape, and paint that nice big brush stroke. If you guys want to look again, I just started here right on the tip of my lemon, and I just followed that edge to get that highlight there. So if you missed it, go ahead and look at the screen real quick. I'm going to show you how I did on this one. I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm just following the edge, just the top edge of it, because we don't want to do the bottom. That's going to be in shadow, very loosely using that term, but that's how we're going to be doing this painting tonight. So again, I did Bumblebee on the top edges of these 2 lemons. So go ahead and do that now, and then I'm going to rinse my brush off. So now I'm going to grab the smaller of my 2 round brushes. So my number 5 round, And I'm going to put a little more moon yellow on my palette. I'm kind of running out, so I'm just going to put a little bit more moon yellow. This is the darker of our two yellows. And we're just going to use that, even though, like I said, it's normally a darker version of the color. We're just, since we have this sort of layered look going, if you've got the 2 panels of glass, we're going to use this as the, you know, shadow. Like I said, if you just got the canvas, obviously, if you try to paint this as a shadow over this, you're not going to see it. So just kind of skip this step. Don't worry about it. Your lemons will still look really dimensional. But for those of you who do have the layered pieces of glass, I'm going to grab my number 5 round brush. I'm going to pick up some moon yellow, and I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom side, the underside of these lemons. And since, you know, it is the same color, but you'll see the difference through the dimension. Again, if you're just painting on one piece of glass or on a canvas, just skip this step. But for those of you who do have the 2 panes of glass, we're going to continue with this color with this brush, and we're going to do a really loose outline around the rind or the skins of our lemon. So I'm just following that exact line. We're just giving it a little bit more dimension. Again, if you have the 2 panes of glass, you'll really see the difference. If not, just skip this step and don't worry about it. Just loosely following the rinds to get that nice layered dimension effect. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and do the same thing with our leaves. So if you remember, guys, when we painted the base color of our leaves, we mixed the darker and the lighter of the 2 greens we have, and we got a nice medium color. And remember I mentioned the reason we did that is so when we went back on the top layer and painted the highlights and the shadows, you'd be able to tell the difference. So that's kind of why we were mixing those yellows too. I know a couple of you ran into problems there. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. But just hopefully you were able to mix that mid-tone of green so you'll really be able to see the difference now. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 10 round brush, which is the larger of my 2 round brushes. And I'm going to pick up some of my citrus green. I just want to double check. Yep, citrus green. And this lighter green, of course, is going to be the, you know, highlight of our leaves. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did to our lemons. We're going to go on the top edge of all of our leaf shapes with this color. So just, you know, these are kind of hard since they're vertical. So like the top would kind of be like these layers that are starting to, or these edges, I should say, that are starting to go up. So I'm just going to follow that edge there. And I'm just doing a nice bold brush stroke. And then the top edge, this one, of course, is right here. It's easy. Same for this one. I'm just going right on that top edge. And I'm even going to go in, now that I have this color, and add a few more like little leaves here and there. So what I mean by that is I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to kind of flick it here and maybe flick it there and just add a little bit more detail and a little bit more greenery. So maybe add some here and there, maybe a couple here and a couple there. Just little flick marks. Again, we're just sort of like continuing to fill in our composition and make sure it's nice and full. So go ahead and do that now. And then once you've done that, we're going to continue with the same brush. I went ahead and I rinsed my brush off. And I'm going to pick up some of my classic greens. So now it's the darker of our 2 greens. And we're going to do the same thing on the underside of our leaves. So it's really going to make it pop. We have this nice, rich green color. And you're really going to see that really well. See how nice that looks? So I'm going on the underside. So the opposite of whichever side you put the citrus green is now where you're going to go with this green color. You can even add, oops, I dipped in white by accident. You can even add a little bit, you know, of this color to those leaves you just made. And since they're wet, they'll kind of blend together on these smaller leaves that we just kind of added. And that's really nice too. That's a really nice effect. Okay. You guys can see it's really starting to come together. We just have a couple of last details to add and then we'll be done. So I'll give you guys just a second to catch up. I want to make sure everybody's kind of kind of keeping pace. So I'll give you guys 1 minute to catch up, and then we'll move on to our final details of our painting, and we will be on time tonight.
Oh, yes, look at us.
I try my best to design these paintings to last an hour. It doesn't always work out for me, but I really do try. And while we're waiting, guys, make sure we're gonna move on to our little lemon wedge shapes here. So make sure they're dry. If you feel like if yours are a little bit tacky still, go ahead and hit yours with the hairdryer if you've got it, because we're about to paint on top of that and we don't want it to be wet. So go ahead if you need to. Mine are dry, so hopefully yours are too. But if not, go ahead and dry those now. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pick up my number 5 round brush. So this is the smaller of my 2 round brushes. And I'm going to use the handle of my brush as a little stamp to add some of these textured areas to our lemon. Of course, if you think of a lemon, it's got all those little dots in it, all those little divots, and lots of that really classic looking like lemon texture, that fruit texture that lemons and oranges and other citrus fruits have on the skins. So you want to kind of imply that. We're not going to paint all those tiny little details, but I am going to dip the end of my brush. So everybody take a peek real quick. I'm going to use the end of my brush, not the bristles. And I'm going to dip it in some white. And I'm going to do a few dots on my lemons to just kind of imply that lemon texture. And I'm just doing it on the ones that, of course, are not sliced yet, where the rinds are, or the peels are still on these lemons. And do a little bit of the white color on top. And then again, if you've got the glass layered, I'm going to do a little bit of the moon underneath. If you don't have the layered glass, you can skip the moon yellow because you won't see it because that's the base color. But if you do have the dimension, if you do have that, you know, layer, you will see it. So you can go ahead and add it. Okay, then I'm just gonna wipe my brush off so I don't make a mess. And I'm gonna still hang on to this one. I'm gonna still hang on to my number 5 round brush. And we're gonna remix this color. Remember the color in the beginning? We originally painted our lemon shapes. We mixed our Bumblebee with some of our white to get that nice, pretty, soft, pastel-y lemon color or yellow color. We're gonna mix that again. We want that nice pale yellow. So make sure you get that pale yellow this time so it'll really pop. I'm gonna rinse my paintbrush because I never like to paint immediately after I mix because there's way too much paint in there. So what we're gonna do now is our final step. We're gonna paint the texture. So I'm sure all of you guys know what a lemon looks like. If we think about it, it's got all those pockets of, you know, moisture, all the juice that's in a lemon, all that lemon juice, it's in those little pockets. So that's the really pretty texture inside the lemons. We're going to try our best to sort of mimic that and give you the idea of that in our lemon shape. So again, I've got my number 5 round, my smaller of the round brushes. I'm going to pick up this pale yellow that we just mixed, and I'm going to paint those little textures by very loosely starting in the center of each of my little wedge shapes and just kind of dragging my brush loosely, very loosely to the edge. So I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to very carefully lift this up without messing up all of my layers. It's kind of stuck to my table. So you guys can see this detail that I'm talking about. So I'm going to start in the middle. You guys want to look, and I'm going to wiggle my way to the edge to get that really detailed little lemon texture. So those little squiggles, it's going to give us that look. It's really loosely dragging my brush. You guys see that? I'm pulling down here because it's more comfortable for my hand this way. I'm just really gently squiggling my brush and getting that nice fine line because I'm not pressing down very hard. Pressing down very lightly, and I'm squiggling my brush to get that nice little organic shape. And the same thing for our top lemon. Just doing this on all of my little wedges. Get that extra layer of detail that really makes this painting complete. Okay, so that was the last step. You guys can see, look, I have these two panels even squished together. And can you see like that awesome dimension you're getting? Just those two panels of glass. That's why I love this technique. You get so many layers that you wouldn't have gotten on a flat painting. Again, I'm sure if you just did it on one, I'm sure it's still really gorgeous, but just, you know, to inspire you guys for the future, painting on these two panes of glass, you just get a really different look. So with that said, that is it for our summer citrus painting. So I really hope you guys had fun. If you liked this class and you are not already a member of our Facebook group, please go to Facebook and search for Let's Paint with Plaid. It's a really amazing painting group. Whether this is your first painting ever or you've been painting for many, many years, we have, you know, all types on there. So whether you're a decorative painter or an oil painter or whatever it is that you like to do, we would love to have you there. We'd love to see your work. We'd love to see you comment on other people's work. I'm in that group. John's in that group. We're all in that group. We have so much fun there. We also have a lot of great original content in there as well. So if you like this painting, we have tons more like this in that group. Andy Jones does instructional videos on there, his Lunch and Learn twice a week. So there's plenty more to learn with plaid. And for next week, speaking of Andy Jones, he will be here at the Michael's Community Classroom. So Andy Jones will be here next week painting this gorgeous painting. We've all been oohing and awing over it. So I know you guys are going to love it. He has called it Summer Kaleidoscope. So he will be painting these gorgeous tulips right here in the Michael's Community Classroom, same time next week. So make sure to tune in then. We've got all of our classes planned out through June with Michael's, through June and July. So we'll be here all summer. We're super excited to be painting with you guys. We'll be here through summer and fall. We have so much fun. And I think that's it, John. Did I miss anything?
I think that is it. We will look forward to seeing you guys next Monday. And please, if you have painted this painting, tag, you know, Make It With Michael's, tag Plaid Crafts. Let's Paint Challenge so that we can see your painting. We would love to see it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
We'll see you. Bye, everyone.